It sounds like a couple of made-up words, and hearing it being played sounds even stranger. So what is a hurdy-gurdy? A hurdy-gurdy is a stringed instrument that utilizes keys and a wheel to produce its unique sound. Nigel Eaton has been playing the hurdy-gurdy since 1981, when his father, Christopher Eaton, started making them. I'm spending 2 weeks with Nigel to learn about the instrument, from its history, its mechanics, the makers behind them, and its relevance in the modern world. So, how does the hurdy-gurdy work?
On a hurdy-gurdy you have a handle which with a wheel, and the edge of the wheel, you'll notice, is a very similar width to that of a violin bow. And in this case though, if you turn the handle, you're aware that the wheel is now turning and the edge of the wheel is engaging with, well, it's not engaging with anything at the moment. So there, we lower a string onto it, now engaging with the string, so it's the bow bowing the string. But instead of then having fingers on a violin fingerboard to shorten the length of the melody strings, on hurdy-gurdy you have the keys which slide in and shorten the melody strings.
The hurdy-gurdy is most commonly used in folk music, but has been used in many genres, including metal music in bands such as Elvati, and in alternative and indie music with bands such as Fawn and Arcade Fire. Nigel has played in several bands, and went on to play in the Page and Plant tour from 1994 to 1996.
One day Robert Plant phoned me up and asked if I would go and play as a session musician. And then about a year later I got a phone call from Robert again saying that they were thinking about going back into the studio and making an album. And yeah, at that meeting I met Jimmy finally, and he had brought along the hurdy-gurdy that he was playing in The Song Remains the Same. So I was able to happily, I had an instrument with me that Dad made, which was semi-acoustic, so it's got covered in pickups. And I plugged it into Jimmy's guitar amplification system. And of course, you can plug a kazoo into Jimmy Page's guitar amplification system, and it will sound like Concorde taking off. I mean, it sounded fabulous straight away. So Jimmy was quite pleased with the sound. And at that meeting, they said, well, we're going to do this MTV thing and an album, and we're going to tour. And I think they already had visions of me performing with the hurdy-gurdy during the concerts, and they also understood, unlike me, that the instrument would be accepted by the bulk of Zeppelin fans, because of course they would be aware of the history, unlike me.
The hurdy-gurdy is traditionally played for dancing, often taking place at outdoor festivals, on village squares and at barn dances. The bagpipe is most commonly played alongside the hurdy-gurdy, being another drone instrument, but others include the violin, melodeon and clarinet. A rarely seen combination with the hurdy-gurdy, but a pleasant sounding one nonetheless, is the piano accordion, which has a noticeable tonal difference to the hurdy-gurdy. As opposed to most hurdy-gurdys, the piano accordion has chords which help to sweeten the endless drone of the hurdy-gurdy into something more varied to listen to. The Organistrum is the predecessor to the hurdy-gurdy, dating back to the 10th century. It is traditionally played by two people, whereas the hurdy-gurdy is in essence a one-man band. The earliest known use of a hurdy-gurdy comes from the 13th century. So how difficult is it to learn to play the hurdy-gurdy? I figured I'd give it a try on the Organistrum, as that way I only had to turn the handle, leaving the keys to Nigel. The hurdy-gurdy has been portrayed in many artworks throughout the centuries. In the 15th century, Hieronymus Bosch painted the Hurdy Gurdy as part of a vision of hell, the instrument of the devil. The Hurdy Gurdy was popular amongst travelling musicians, being portable, able to make lots of sounds at once, and being very noisy. In this image, you see a Hurdy Gurdy and strings attached to bells with a drum on the back, a proper one-man band. Artists painted these street musicians, or employed models, often children, to pose with the instrument. This is an oil painting from 1866, made by George Walter Harris. The original of this piece was painted by Gustave Jacquet in 1907, titled La Joueuse de Vielle, meaning the female hurdy-gurdy player. So what makes people decide they want to create such an instrument? Christopher Eaton isn't the only hurdy-gurdy maker in the UK. I've come to visit Claire Dugué, a French maker based in England.
So I grew up in France and I played guitar, flamenco guitar, and my plan was to learn to make guitars. So I went to London to learn in an instrument making school, and there was no space in the guitar workshop, so I was put in the early stringed instruments, so early guitars, lutes, Renaissance lutes, and so on. And that was great. And really I discovered the hurdy-gurdy in London. So went to a dance and saw two hurdy-gurdy players, Cliff Stapleton and Nigel Eaton playing. And I thought that was fantastic. Went back to my course the next day and said, this is it, this is what I want to make. So the following year, a few months later, I made my first hurdy-gurdy.
Claire says she does not know how many hurdy-gurdys she has made, but can confidently say she has made well over 200.
I remember being really inspired by all the makers. I remember going to this French festival and there were all the hurdy-gurdy makers there, and I remember feeling just very inspired by all the modern things happening. You could do anything with a hurdy-gurdy. It keeps on evolving. So that's I found really inspiring.
Claire has also made many innovations to her instruments that other makers have not, including an external frame that gives distance between the player and the instrument to avoid dampening the sound. Whilst not overly common, Claire says that more young people are showing interest in the instrument as well.
There's a big expanding scene with a lot of young children in Spain. There's quite a lot also in Belgium. The scene is also expanding in Germany, Netherlands. And I think that goes with schools being organized and proper tuition. So there's quite a lot of young people playing.
Another hurdy-gurdy maker is Sam Palmer, who I went to see to discuss his experiences with the instrument, including a book that he and his mother Suzanne Palmer wrote about the history of the instrument, along with a guide on how to play the hurdy-gurdy. So why did Sam and his mother decide to write a book on this bizarre instrument?
I started making hurdy-gurdies and didn't know a lot about them. There was very little published in the English language, but basically totally in the dark. So I made a hurdy-gurdy, made it up, and obviously got interested. And my mother is an archaeologist, or was an archaeologist. Always interested in history and folklore and that sort of thing. And she thought, what a fantastic project for herself. The book mostly is a history book about, obviously, the usage of it throughout the centuries, where the instrument originates from, the countries that it's known to be played and made, and and ultimately the music that's played on it.
But it's not just history with Sam, as he's created something quite special. This is a Sam Gurdy, standing for Samples Audio MIDI. It is a digital hurdy-gurdy which plays sound samples either through its onboard speaker or by plugging it into an amplifier.
can do things with it, different keys and the rest of it. Mostly a practice instrument, and I surprised myself really how good it was. And in fact, it's good enough that I've played it actually in public with other instruments and nobody's batted an eyelid. So I played through an amplifier, give it a nice bit of boost bass and the rest of it. It can sound pretty much like the real thing.
The instrument may be nearly a millennium old, but that hasn't stopped people in the modern day from taking advantage of its strange shape and sound in all kinds of media, including video games, films and shows. The instrument has been depicted in video games such as Sea of Thieves, God of War and The Witcher. It has been used in shows like Black Sails, and has even been animated for film, as can be seen in the 2004 film The Polar Express. Nigel Eaton was actually lucky enough to be animated by renowned animator and hurdy-gurdy fanatic Michael Schlingmann, who has worked on several films such as The Road to El Dorado and Corpse Bride. This animation is of Nigel performing live on stage whilst on the Page and Plant tour.
Because I saw the clip of Nigel playing with Led Zeppelin in 1996 and him stomping around on stage, I just thought this would make a really nice animation cycle. So I did a young Nigel with curly hair stomping away as he's playing the hurdy-gurdy.
Funnily enough, Michael is an owner of one of Claire Dugué's hurdy-gurdys as well. Michael was lucky enough to find one online, whereas most people have to wait years to receive their custom-made hurdy-gurdy.
Nigel suddenly phoned and said that there's a hurdy-gurdy on eBay for sale, and it's a no-brainer. It was pretty much the asking price and with no waiting list. And somebody who was in the film industry wanted to play the hurdy-gurdy, never found the time, and was selling his Claire Dugué. And so I basically picked it up on the next day. So I waited for all of 2 days for that hurdy-gurdy.
The name hurdy-gurdy is often still met with the question, what's a hurdy-gurdy? But with modern advancements, ranging from digital hurdy-gurdys being created, like the Sam Gurdy, to films, TV shows and video games bringing in more attention from a younger audience, the instrument is definitely getting more recognition. Are we looking at the next guitar or piano? No, certainly not. But if the hurdy-gurdy continues to be used in the digital realm, the instrument is on track to become more popular than it has ever been before.